What's up, creators? This is John once again, and you have found the Sketch Magazine podcast. I am here, as always, with Bill Nichols and Bob Hickey, and tonight we will be talking about writing. Hey, how you doing?
All right.
Doing great.
So, what about this writing stuff? You mean comics don't just write themselves? The devil,
Oh,
you say?
if only they did. It would be so much easier, but they don't. Sometimes they do, but for about a panel, maybe.
Maybe.
It depends on the book. And depends on the
Right.
characters.
Right.
Well, writing doesn't get near as much play or near as much of a how-to tutorials as the artists or inkers or even colorists. So, for those who are completely clueless what the heck a writer in comics even does, one of you detail what a writer does,
Go for it, Bill.
other than the simple they write. Give it a little more than that.
Well, writer is the beginner of the idea, the project, and from the writer springs everything. Really, it starts there with the idea, and then it is turned into words. And some writers just write a plot, just the basic action. Some write a very detailed account of what happens page by page, panel by panel. Some almost write books. I mean, I've seen Alan Moore's descriptions for some of the Miracle Man things printed back in the day of Eclipse and stuff. I mean, it's brilliant stuff, and it's very detailed. Translating that stuff it would be difficult, but it runs from the very simple to the very complex, and out of that, the artist takes those words and turns them into pictures. And of course, the letterer takes the dialogue and all that, but you have a different process depending on how you work. You know, so that's the very quick explanation of what a writer does.
Well, which one do either of you think of has the more benefit? The one where plots, which I think most people refer to as the Marvel style,
Hmm.
or the panel by panel breakdowns. I mean, I know I know some people prefer each for different reasons. So what do either of you think is the benefits of both, or if there's one that's really better over the other?
Uh, Myself, it depends on the artist. There's been some artists that I've worked with where I've done the panel by panel, exact description of what I wanted, way I moved it, and everything. And then there's the story where I had a 15-minute conversation on the phone with Mitch Bird, and the pages started showing up. Of course, it's always nice when he puts notes on it to remind me what we talked about. I usually like a loose plot, and if I really get into a scene myself, I'll put in a lot of detail. But then if I'm going to depend on the artist to carry a bulk of this too, and I'll leave some opening room for interpretations, and if he needs to extend something or play around with it. So to me, it depends on the project, and it depends on who you're working with, really, and how you would write. Now, Bill was talking about what a writer does. A writer also has to a good writer probably has a good editor too, though, to keep them straight. I know I like to keep somebody over top and looking at my stuff, whether it's Bill here or Bill Love, and tell me, one, is it coherent? Is it working within the characters? Not exactly come in and change stuff, but just make sure I'm not. Sometimes you can be too close to a project, and you got to make sure that people outside can understand where you're going with it. So.
Right. You may have a clear idea in your head of what you are attempting to do, but because you are so close to it, it's hard to be some objective. Just like the Clay's Way when we were talking about that,
Hmm.
something that works in real life. It sounds really funny in real life. Transferring that into a strip form is tricky, but it can be done. It's just a different take,
Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work though. The first strip we did, and I ended up pulling it, was a strip on recycling, and it really happened. My wife had a bunch of recycling sitting around, and she was like, "Clay, take the recycling outside." And he popped off like within right behind it. I'm letting it collect or something. I forget exact terminology,
Let
but
it grow.
letting it grow, and it was
Yep.
so funny. I mean, his brother Luke and I would just start dying laughing because he was so quick with it. The problem is writing it in a strip. The delivery isn't that quick, so it read horrible. I posted it and Bill read this. I hate it. And I pulled it right back off. It just didn't work, and then this strip's sitting here, and we'll write something else to it and make it work. But it's sometimes real life works, and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you can play with real life and then tweak it into a good strip, and that's like the one with the Reds right now. The whole thing about Clay jumping on board with the Saints is true. The whole write-up I wrote about him getting a card, and also now Deuce McAllister was his player, which he didn't even know he wasn't playing anymore. And he followed the Saints all year last year. Didn't even know who the quarterback was till mid-season. And here they go, win Super Bowl. So I'm always teasing him. Now he's rooting for the Reds to win a World Series. And
Good luck charm.
he tells me I'm greedy. I want all my teams to win. I want the Bengals to win Super Bowl, Reds win World Series. I want number 88 to win a NASCAR championship. I was like, there's nothing greedy about that. Just rooting for my favorites.
Only if you're putting bets down is it greedy?
Yeah.
Based on Clay's
Hey,
predictions.
if the Reds win the World Series, hey, I'll be betting on whatever Clay's rooting for next year.
But that brings up a good question mentioning Clay's way. Now that you specifically, Bob, have done both, written for comics and have now written a comic strip, maybe you can go into the differences, the challenges, and the similarities of those two art forms.
Well, I think writing for a strip, to me, right now, is a lot harder. Sometimes they flow, and you go boom, 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 and write them off 4, 5, 6 in a row. Sometimes I'll be thinking days about what to write. And even once you write it and it's drawn and you sit there and you script it, you're changing it because the delivery's not working or where you're trying to achieve a thing. Because you only got 4 panels, probably at the most. And so you got to sort of set something up and then boom, nail it. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. The good thing about web strip publishing is you got deadlines, and I want to meet those deadlines. I want a new strip every Monday, a new strip every Friday, and we're hoping in a month to have a new strip every Wednesday. So that's 3 times a week. Right now it's 2, and we want to guarantee to hit those deadlines. Even though it's new, the readership's just starting to build. We want to be out there, and so it's good that I've got to get it done and got to work through it. It's been rough. It's been rough changing from writing comics where I've got 20, if I need 2 more pages, 22 pages to wrap up a, beginning, middle, and end. Not maybe wrap up that story, but, set them up for the next issue. To do that and go in to do it in 4 panels. Wow. It's a lot harder, but to me, I'm having a lot of fun with it because it's very challenging. I haven't done a lot of humor. I mean, I've written characters that I've known for years, and if they're humorous or not, and when they would use it or not. So here, trying to write a strip to inject a little bit of humor into it, it's a big challenge. It's a big work. You got to really look at what other people have done and try to pull, from real life too. But it's a big challenge. Now, writing comics, it depends. If you're writing your own, create your own project, and I've said this over and over, Blood and Roses pretty much writes itself. I can throw out a situation, and I would know how the girls roll through it. Now, I've got to get them to a certain point at the end, but I would know how Chris and Tam both would react to every situation I would throw at them. So it's not that hard. The new project that I'm working on, which one of these days I will name it, a little harder. I'm just starting to get to know these characters and set up situations. The editor for that's Bill Love, and him and I had an hour conversation on Friday about it, coming up with storylines and where I was wanting to go with it and where we want to add to it and plot twist. And him and I are going to have a 10-hour ride to New York on Thursday for the New York Comic Con.
Right.
We will put a lot of that down in the books. We'll be writing a lot of my plots and ideas and stuff down to not only set up this 4-issue series, but the next 4-issue series, the next one, and sort of roll with where we want to move this to. And we got this whole other group of characters that's developing out of this. And the good thing about talking with somebody else is that characters develop. Sort of like out of the first issue, I had written, and I probably already said this once in a podcast, we'll repeat it, had written that one of the characters is attacked by a bear, wild bear. But there is no wild bears in England. I didn't do my research, evidently. He did. And
Right.
so he said, it's got to be a boar. I said, no, it can't be a boar. It's got to be a bear. So then all of a sudden, out of that, I came up with this private estate, this animal reserve, this school, and this group who runs it. And all of a sudden, it added a huge part of the story together and just changed the whole back end that really I hadn't spent a lot of time developing yet. All developed up around because I couldn't have a bear. So it was pretty cool, right? The way it just rolled together, and
Right.
now it's going to be a pretty big part of it. So you got to play upon things, and you got to be, your mind just constantly got to be rolling things through and be thinking, well, if that doesn't work, how would this work, and how would these characters handle it? He asked me about one of the main characters, and I just told him that's the way this character is. He's noble. He's very, honest, and just, gave him the facts on how this character is and how he would handle a situation. That's the way I write. I have a feeling other writers probably are very meticulous. They sit down and say, okay, I'm going to take Spider-Man from here, and he's going to punch this guy. Boom, 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 20 pages, here you go. I've never been able to write that way. I got to really think about stuff and roll stuff ideas in my head. It's like the Bill and I have been talking about the Blood and Roses series, In the Dark.
Right.
And there we sort of set up that when I blew up Infinity on Bill, all these agents that were out active, some of them's gone rogue, some of them are stuck in time. So we've sort of I created a mess that now is going to add all kinds of possibilities for stories. And I think it's going to be fun. It's going to be fun running it and all these agents that we really didn't even know they were time agents, and other characters we have going that we can play into it. So you sort of take what you've developed and what you've created, and you mold it, and you try to play with it and develop more storylines along the way. So it's fun. It's real fun. So,
Well,
yes.
that brings something up for Bill. Bill, you've had to write in different, I guess the best way to put it would be genres.
Right.
You've had to write super serious. You've written somewhat comedic. You've written kind of across the board from straight superhero to more space adventure, things like that.
Right.
What of all that appeals to you most, and do you find yourself having a particular problem writing one type of story over the other?
No, not really. When we did the Sketch Magazine Afterburn Media Forum contest here, back when it was our own board,
Right.
some of the things that I did were for a lot of it was prose, but part of the challenge of the contest was turn this into a comic book page. With that particular thing, it became a challenge for me and a fun thing for me to write a Western, to write a detective story, to write it was several things. So
yeah, there's been a lot.
And it was a that was a challenge for me to do it that way. And a couple of times I did scripts, and I did some my fallback was some of the Sparta Bay things, the situations and things. But one genre over another, I mean, I'm familiar with them all, so it wasn't that hard for me. I mean, I know that and kind of that was the challenge for me. I put the challenge to myself to see if I could pull it off. And one of my favorite pieces that I wrote was the Charmed Knife, a scenario with a dragon. That was a sort of sword and sorcery thing with some comic touches added. And to make that funny, or to make it was funny to me, and it turned out to be humorous to other people.
Right.
That was it for me, I pull it off. And the contest was pretty good. I think Steve Leidick won that one, and there were several very imaginative entries to those contests, and part of that too was the challenge for the artist and the guys that were entering the contest was to challenge themselves to think outside what they're familiar with, to go into another genre. I think that worked pretty well. I mean, I enjoy all those things. I mean, my favorite thing to read really is science fiction. I don't really like hard science fiction. I really don't care how many parsecs it is to Alpha Centauri. I don't care. I don't care what the mixture for warp speed. Hard science, but for me it's the adventure and the story and the characters, and my writing I think is more about that.
Well, you mentioned writing, that long dialogue piece. Well, not dialogue piece, that long prose piece, rather.
Right.
Is that how you normally approach any sort of page? And if so, do you find it particularly challenging to go back in and have to deal with the dialogue after an artist has already hit it, or was that just something specific to that particular contest?
No, if I was going to take that prose piece and turn it into a comic book page, or to dialogue that particular piece, I'm pretty flexible with that. And it was that particular thing became that's one of my my book projects that someday maybe I'll continue to finish or to work on. But if you look on actually last week or in the last week, I put on Comics Mentor part of a script that I did for Willow, which was one of the contests that we did. And Sammy Kavisa, a guy from Finland, won that. And he did a really great job taking the first 2 pages and, or maybe the page. I think it was the first 2 pages maybe, but he translated that pretty well. And what I do is usually I write the scene and maybe a suggestion of the caption or the dialogue, but it's not hard and fast because I can, based on what the artist turns in, I may have some better idea of how to punch that up to really emphasize what I was trying to do and to play off what the artist has done. So it becomes a collaboration at that point. Tom and Mary Beerbaum, when they were doing Dead Kid, I got copies of a lot of their Legion pages, but because they would get them so that they could dialogue off of those.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty cool, and it really worked out well for me and us because we got copies of Legion pages for samples. So that's how they were. They plotted, and their hard dialogue that they wrote for the book was based on the art, because you want to look at the pacing too, and you want to make it suit the visual that's been the artist has turned in. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but
yeah, it does. What do you think? Do either one of you think it's a detriment to an artist? Like the way I write, I've just really started writing seriously for publication, and the way I write is I plot panel plot everything, including adding the dialogue in every panel. I mean, I'm pretty specific in every panel what I want. Am I kind of proving a disservice to the artist, or do you think that's something a lot of artists appreciate?
Well, I think some artists appreciate it, as long as you're flexible on your end, and if he says, that's just not flowing, and if he's wanting to tweak it, unless you are hard set on no, that's exactly the way I want it, then
right,
you might have a problem. But a lot of times when you write something, it just doesn't work, breaking it down panel by panel, because you've got to move everything down a page. You've got to come across, left to right, and then down across the page, and left, right, across the bottom, and then back up to the next page. You guys sort of think that way when you're writing, but it doesn't always adapt over when they're drawing it. No, I think the more you can put down, and I've had artists, they read my scripts and says, "Wow," because in certain areas of my script there's lots of details, and then I'll say 4-page fight scenes here, have fun, and then I'll have lots of details. Because
Right.
I don't need a detailed fight scene. I can say who's fighting who and what the effects are going to be, and this is where they're going to end up. Now, go have fun for 4 pages. And sometimes that happens on a page. I'll go, okay, this panel is this page. They need to move from this scene to this scene, and then I'll wrap it up at the bottom of that page. I'm not going to hold their hand all the way through it. They are the artists. They need to contribute some in it to the story, and I think it's sort of what it does. It helps them to contribute some to the story when you don't hand them every single bit. Now,
Right.
some younger artists, it's a good thing to hold their hand a little closer and until they get used to the flow of the page and movement of the story.
Well,
Yeah.
that also begs the question, and I don't know if you guys have done this a lot, but I spent part of the weekend creating character descriptions and biographies for some new characters that someone is doing on a book for me. Is that something you find yourself doing a lot, or do you generally just leap right into the story, and as the story goes on, you give the artist a little more as to the character? I don't know if I'm making
Yeah,
any sense with that
I,
question.
I think it sort of depends. I think before you even have a story, you gotta have lead characters. So you
Right.
sort of gotta know who the leads are. But I think as you're writing, there's new characters that step into place. There's new situations that create new characters or add to those characters. Um, so I think it's a little of both. I think you gotta have a ton of preconceived characters ready to tell a story about, or you're really not going to understand how that story moves, how that
Right.
character, how that story's going on if you don't know and understand what the characters would do. I think it's a little both. I know we're going to have a summit late October for Skystorm. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things I really want to get done is a who's who of Skystorm Universe so we can post it on the website. And so I want to bring everything we've ever published or anything we have sketches of, look at these characters and get something written, if we don't already have it,
Right.
down. So then we can get these characters online, let people start to figure out who they are and start getting involved in, well, that one's cool. What's this one about? Oh, where's that one at? So it's important to know your characters, but you sort of have to keep it open for new possibilities. So I think both. I don't know. How about you, Bill?
Yeah. If you're writing, say, for one idea, then definitely you want to have something fleshed out about that character so that you have something hard and fast sort of to go by, whether it's you start your own uh, story bible or character bible entry of that person, because as you write, things can change and things can be added, because as you're writing, their history is changing a little bit, or you may think about something in their past that it changes that changes the story or the future, and it may spark another idea, spark another character. When I was writing Blood and Roses, for example, I created the Temps.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you had them there, but I gave them a name.
Right.
The guards on Infinity, and I gave them the girls people to play off of, other than just Cronus, who they always had to fight with.
Right.
So, that was that created or had the potential to create a vast cast, and it still is. I mean, there's, they're all still out there. So,
Most of
yeah, yeah.
them. Well,
So,
Well, Bob, you touched on this briefly. How important is research for a writer? Do you think it's really important, or does it sort of taint your creativity when you bring too many facts into it?
I think it depends on what kind of research you're talking about. As soon as I started working on Clay's Way, I took like all my Calvin and Hobbes and all my peanuts and I put them away. I do not want to stumble across something and unconsciously in 2 3 months write one, think this is great, only to be already done. Because needless to say, no matter say whatever I do, it's going to already be done somewhere on another strip somehow, some way. You know, it's just
And given that you have a young boy with an imaginary
there's
animal that
already
you,
a huge
yeah,
connection there. Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. So yeah, they're all. I mean, I have a huge Calvin and Hobbes collection. Got it from our
Right.
birthday last year. Packed it up. I couldn't right now until I really get these characters in my head. So no matter what situation I put them in, I know what they're going to do. I need no temptation. Now, if I'm
Yeah.
researching a subject or a storyline, yeah, dive in, man. Google. You don't have to go to the library anymore. Everything's online. I needed for current. I need a logo, a Ritz logo for the current strip at Claysway. Got online, did a logo search. Oh, there's a logo. Okay, grab a copy of that, prove it over, trace over it. Boom, done. Simple. So yeah, do your research. The new book that I'm working on. There's a lot of preconceived history for a few of the characters. So I'm doing a lot of studying on it. Some of them I'm going to use, some of them not. But I want to know at least a little bit about it because I'm going to run into fans out there of some of these characters, even though these are my versions of these characters, not somebody else's,
Right.
who's going to say I'm doing it wrong. And I want to know at least from where they're coming from. You want to do your research as much as possible, but don't research it to death. Write, create, work, make
Right.
stuff. That's more important. Um,
What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think you can be so tied into things that you can. It is important to know certain things, whether it's about the wild bears in England or if you are writing hard fiction, to know how many parsecs and all that. But it kind of it depends sort of on your project. I mean, some things can be nebulous. A blaster is a blaster. Sometimes the artist has some things the artist can have fun with creating or drawing or saying, I've always wanted to draw something this way. And, unless you just are so tied into it, like your research or be so meticulous, well, to get comic book pages back and the artist has drawn the completely wrong uh, gun for a time. If you know your stuff, say you're Bo Smith and you know that stuff, or Bill Tucci, you know that stuff. Of course, Billy would be drawing it himself, so that would
Right.
be
No
bad.
kidding. Yeah.
right.
That would be bad. But to have a general idea, and I have some reference stuff here, and of course, with the internet and just general knowledge and all that stuff, you can find a lot of the stuff easily enough. So it's easily checked or referenced. And I mean, it is important, but just like locking yourself into um, your script format or your plot format to orchestrate everything down to the last character in each panel. If you are so tied into that where you have no elasticity with the artist, where it's you get these pages back and they're not exactly what is in the script or whatever. That could be. I tend to. I don't know if you've ever seen Mike Barron's scripts, so to speak, but he sort of draws out the comic book page as he sees it.
Right.
And if you look in, I think it's Art of Steve Rude, there's an example or two of Mike's script, and then Steve's, where Steve took it and he turned it into what how he does it. And I've done that. I like the thumbnail. I very much encourage artists to thumbnail their pages. Yeah, instead of just, I know some artists and they will just draw, and then by the time they get to page 5, maybe they have to look back at page 1 and go, "Ooh, I could have done that better," and because they didn't just plan this out. And that's an example of page pacing, just like with the strip. It's just in a long elongated form. But yeah, you can be too locked into reference just like you can anything else. It's just you have to be a little bit flexible, or know your stuff and back up what you're saying.
And
Well, let's.
okay, let me contribute on
No,
that.
go ahead. Go ahead.
The thumbnails or the roughs don't have to be really tight either.
Mhm.
Just sort of showing the movement. Bill, next time if I ever get my studio unpacked, I have a couple of Neil Gaiman's ash cans. Back when we did a interview of Neil in Sketch Magazine, they sent me a couple of photocopies of his full ash cans that he did for Sandman,
Oh my.
and it's cool stuff. So
Well, that's a,
that's
that
neat stuff.
yeah, that's the kind of stuff I groove on, and
Mhm.
I love to see that stuff, and I love for other people to see that stuff, because that also sort of looks into the mindset of the creator, whether it's the writer or the penciler, or an inker or whoever, because inkers have that too.
Oh yeah.
You know, some, like Steve Rude warms up maybe looking at some Alex Raymond stuff, and just different others. And it's not going to be Steve Rude hour, but that came off the top of my. I remember him reading that about him, and other people do that too, where they just sort of warm up, or they sort of want to channel that. I knew a guy years ago that would. I mean, this is a horrible thing, but he would draw in his comics. He would trace. He would trace the picture in the comic book, and then try to redraw it on a sketchbook
Wow.
right after that. And we were kids, so you're talking 40 years ago. Well, not 40, but it's a long time ago. But just think about what those comics are worth now.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So.
Well, I was thinking let's get real specific, Bill. Take Sparta Bay for instance. How much research went into that?
Research, not a lot. Mostly it's development. I know it's a city. I know it's on the East Coast, and now it's the characters, putting the characters in, because there are certain things that are there and they have been there. Sparta Bay is really parts of these stories that I have come up with over the years, and I just gave them all a place to play, and they interconnect. And that's also a challenge for me, or a fun thing for me, is to have this continuity, because as one character or one story is going, there are other characters and other stories off to the side, and they, you may see something on the news in one comic that has something to do with one of the other projects or whatever, So, I mean, certain specific things, maybe mythology, and not so much to make sure I get it right because it's my take on things, but that. I mean, there would be a little bit, but like I said, that it's mostly character development and writing the stories and stuff. So,
Well,
in that situation, not.
Well, what about Blood and Roses, Bob? In your case, how much went into that?
as far as research,
Yeah, as far as just doing research.
when I developed it as a time traveling story, and I think you probably one of them, you mentioned why didn't I hit very certain events, like the death of JFK and Lincolnshire and all that stuff, and I don't need to do those. Those have been done. Well, we know the history of them, and they've been done to death as far as quote unquote time traveling. So I was wanting not really use it for that factor, but use it for the science fiction and the fantasy factor of time travel. And the reason I really liked it, I fell in love with a book by Dean Koontz called Lightning. And then there he did time travel right. It's a wonderful book. I've read it 5 times now. And it's just, it's a very good book. It's called Lightning. I like the whole concept of time travel. So that's sort of with the girls. The girls came from a print that Joe Martin and I did. And I came up with ideas from the characters and roll with them. Now, a lot of times I'll throw situations out there knowing I got to come back somehow and fix this. In the current storyline, in the dark, I launched it with them sitting around a campfire with their kids telling stories. Well, I have no clue. And when they stop adventuring and when they have kids and who's the daddies and no idea. We'll have to touch that base somewhere down the road, you know. But I just like the whole concept of the family unity, that they both had kids about the same age, and that they were familiar enough with each other that they were pestering each other around the campfire, and then they were willing to sit down and listen to a story about what one of their mom's adventures, you know, and what they used to do, and so I really enjoyed that lead-in into the story, you know, that quote unquote new era of Blood and Roses. But boy, you know, it's sort of something I threw out there that Bill somehow we got to fix at some point in time, or we don't, you know. Hopefully we get to wrap it up, but so a lot of times I'll throw stuff out there and say, okay, I know I got to come back and fix this, but you know, I can't always just blow up Infinity and wipe it away, right, Bill?
Well, who's to say that Infinity's totally blown up?
You know what? We were talking about it the other day, and I'm thinking, ooh, what if it was still out there ticking away, just damaged real bad?
Maybe it was a dream sequence.
Oh, no.
And Bobby comes out of the shower. And goes,
Exactly.
Oh, nobody.
and
Yeah.
says, who shot JR?
No,
Yeah.
our Bobby comes out of the shower and says, "Just kidding."
Yeah. You guys are funny. No, it's not a dream sequence. It happened.
So let me put a scenario out there. Okay, I'm a writer. It's we're getting near the end, but it's still con season.
Mhm.
So I'm a writer. I really want to write for somebody, some company. Doesn't have to be one of the big boys, but some company. What do I need to do to get my name out there, get an editor interested in me purely as a writer?
Yeah.
Not as a writer artist or, a writer slash colorist or whatever. Just a writer.
Good luck.
Good luck.
I don't mean to be doom and gloom again.
And the hopes and dreams of thousands just crash.
No, well, think about it. There's tons of writers sitting out there waiting in line.
Right.
And right now, they're not even looking at us. They're looking at Hollywood for writing because they're names that they can pick up. You know, the J. Michael Straczynskis and the Josh Whedons and, these
Jeff
guys,
Johns.
Jeff Johns. So it's almost impossible to stumble into a good sized gig and not have already done the writer artist thing. And I think it's
Right.
important to do the writer artist thing. Find a buddy, get on DeviantArt, get out there on Facebook, find somebody who's looking for a writer to work with, and start learning your craft, and let him learn his craft, and it gives you both a piece to go and sell with. Whether it's something you really die hard to get published, or it's something that let's do a story, and then he has his art, he can go out and try to get an art job, and you have your written drawn for you because it is a visual medium, and you take it around the shop. I mean, it's just that's what you're gonna find with this podcast. We're gonna be very honest to you. It's very, very hard to get a job by handing in a full script. Never hand in a full script. Hand in a synopsis of a story idea that hasn't already been done. They're just not looking. There's too many of them out there right now. And so the best thing is to hand in, either get self-published or at least create some art samples and writing samples that you can hand. I get handed many of those at conventions when I'm behind the blue line tables. They'll hand me, story samples. Says I'm a writer, my friend draws, and here's what we produced. His card's attached to it. It's very, recognizable that on there he says I'm the writer. So I'm really looking at this sample from him as the writer. So I've also been at a con where I've got the same sample from the artist, and I'm like, well, I've already got your sample. Let me pull your card and stick with the other one. So I've seen them out there doing it. It's what you've just about, if you want to work in this industry, And if you want to work for the big guys, you've got to get out there and create some working samples and learn your skills. And you're only going to learn it by doing it. Just like artists, writers got to write. You got to write and write. Now, do you got to write comics to get into comics? No. Nowadays, you can write prose and self-publish your own book online and work on your writing skills writing prose. So there's many different ways to write, develop your skills, and develop your ability. So biggest thing is if you want to do comics, hook up with a buddy and create some samples if nothing else. If you don't want to, the self-publishing thing isn't yours, and I understand not everybody wants to do that. No, I don't understand it because I do. But anyway, I believe there's people that don't want all the hassles of self-publishing and distribution and all that. So if you just want to work in comics, I believe you need to get out there, get some work done so you have a sample package because it is a visual medium. Writing is the hardest thing to get into for comics. And to me, from what I've seen, it's just getting harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bill, why does Bob always bring the boot down? Gosh, sorry.
Well, you have to. No, I mean you have to deal with the realistic aspects of it. But you're right. If you walk into it expecting to get a job at Marvel or DC, unless you know some sort of lightning strikes and you say Shazam or something, it's not going to happen. But it is more likely to happen if you start establishing your track record now by writing some stuff, by getting your work out there. Go to Comic Related. I think the topic thread on the forum is called Creator Corner. Creators Corner. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, it is.
And Digital Webbing has one. Or, there are people on Digital Webbing, Pencil Jack, 10 Ton Studios. There are forums and message boards out there with artists who don't write, and go look at other artists. There are people who are out there just waiting to collaborate, but you've got to find them, and maybe you find the match that actually just it brings out something in you as a writer and inspires you, and hopefully you bring something out in that give an artist the structure that he or she needs to pull off their end of it, and you come out with some comics. I mean, that's the biggest thing that we've been talking about is creating comics. And if nothing else, you create and you add to this thing that we all love, and that's why you're listening to this podcast. Hopefully, I just got an email from a friend of mine I went to college with. He's a writer named Chris Offutt. His dad is Andrew J. Offutt, a science fiction writer, and Chris has recommended one of his students to me who wants to get into comics. He writes. He went to Chris's workshops, and I gave him a few of the pointers I just now mentioned, and I said as far as turning that into comics, I can help him with that, and because that's an entirely different discipline. Maybe he's a reader, but he's never been a writer of comics, and that's something I can look at him and maybe give him some pointers in that way. But get out there and create, and if nothing else, you come out with some. You get your ideas out there, and you make some friends.
Well, you mentioned something that applies to all three of us, actually. Do you think that your time writing for Sketch Magazine has helped your writing of comics? Or in my case, even writing for comic related, Do you think writing those other mediums helps your comic writing, or is it two different animals?
Well, for me, it was already there. So, I mean, if anything, it is more experience in writing and firming up those skills. But it is a different sort of animal than writing comics. But I mean, for me, sketch is where Comics Mentor came from in writing the editorials for Sketch, and for writing those contest pieces. That's what I was already doing. It just gave me more of a challenge to do that. So I mean, it's sort of an evolution more than anything else for me. But other people may get that. It is really very much a personal journey, because as you write every new thing, new things happen, and you hopefully your writing continues to grow, even if a big name, say, and you start writing for something. You may be the greatest superhero writer there is, but you may, if you try to write science fiction, which has happened,
Or humor.
maybe, or humor,
Yeah.
then some things fall short, and it's a different, if it's a different thing. But maybe out of that, you do learn. The mistakes that you made in writing this humor thing that didn't work the next time, because you learn from your mistakes, or something gels, something clicks. And I mean, for everybody, it is a journey. It starts somewhere and ends somewhere, and it ends somewhere, hopefully way down the road. But it's got to start somewhere. So go. Like I said, just create comics. You have to take a step
Hmm.
and keep stepping, and hopefully you bring other people along with you. That's one of the things that about collaborating, is that you bring people along with you, and not. I know people who sort of put other people down, sort of to build themselves up, and to be honest, that gets on my nerves uh, terribly, and I don't have a lot of patience for that, because that sort of that whole victim thing we talked about before. Um, because I think if you're good enough, that should be your testimony. That should be the thing that says I'm a writer, is the quality of your work, not how bad someone else writes, or you pointing at someone else saying, look at them, or why didn't I get that job? That person just really cannot write humor, but I can write, three jokes, in a page, or I can quote the Bible, kind of thing, as I was talking
Right.
about in another podcast. Look at the quality of your work and worry about that, not what everybody else is doing. Worry about yourself, because that's what is going to show your passion for it, your talent for it, um, your preparation, your how prepared you are in your reference, if you need to do that. When I wrote Blood and Roses, I read all the stories that Bob had written, and so I had reference in that way about the characters, and I knew the characters fairly well. And one time Bob said, um, he said, I trust you,
Hmm.
which that, like I said, that means a lot to me, for him to say that. So the situations that I put them in, I did research things about the rainforest in that one story, and some stuff about the Old West. Um, I know who Audie Murphy was in the Western one. I but I didn't look and see what kind of six guns people use. I let the artists do that.
Right.
So you know, but I mean, all those things are important, and certain projects may weigh more heavily. Just create comics.
That's
You
what
know,
it comes down to.
get off your hiney.
Yeah, yeah.
I like the word hiney. Get off it.
Tiny.
Word of the
Well,
day,
it's
Heine.
yeah, hiney. Use it in a sentence. So go.
Go tell your
Create.
mom.
He said hiney.
And
He said
yeah,
tiny.
and don't use the excuse that you don't have an artist not to create. Like I said, you can start writing prose. You can start writing scripts. You can start um, just write, create characters. If you get stuck and an idea is not coming for a whole story, then sit down and think about a character, and usually with a character comes a story, somewhere somehow. So get out there and create. We've talked a lot about the concept of writing and ideas of writing. What about Bill? What's your practice? Say, Bill, I need a B&R script. Next story. You're gonna wrap up what's going on. I need. What would you like to plan? What would you give me if I said, okay, where do you want to go with them? Because I want to see, where you want to take them, and usually tell me what you would give me, and then I'll follow it up with what we would do after that.
Well, I would look at what you've done, and what I would really want to do with Blood and Roses is stay true to that. And So I'm not going to come out with something. Maybe they go to a magical dimension, and something that's so totally outside their reality.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would do is give this is the sort of the story that I see them doing, and this is what I hope to get. They're at point A here at this beginning of the story arc. They are at C, or D. We'll say 4 issues each. Because it's a continuing thing. I'm not going to go from A to Z in four issues, but they will continue on after that. So maybe the things out of this story hearken for other things beyond that. We just keep building.
Right.
We're building worlds,
Right.
And that's really what we're keeping the story going, and that's what I want to do as far as Blood and Roses go. Keep the story going to infinity and beyond.
Ooh. And so one thing I would look at is, I'd look at your story ideas and some general concepts, and then I would go, well, bring me this situation, and then, what can we play off of that situation or those characters? And, one thing, and what I want to do with B&R, and Bill and I have discussed this, is bring in some of these other characters that we've created. And, of course, them being time travel, we can do that. And these are some characters that are really cool, but I'm not too sure in this market or in a future market they would hold true to investment of creating their own book. But we can showcase them over in B&R and put them into situations with them. So I want to get a concept, okay, and pacing of how we're going to pull that off before we invest in artists and everything. So you want to sort of have a plan in place, and so you need to learn how to write a good synopsis or good ideas or plots, and I sort of one thing we haven't really talked about is plotting. Sit down, breaking down your story ideas and pace them out. And I worked on some this afternoon. I had some dead time. I was waiting, and I sort of broke down a 4-story arc, and it's just real simple, 2 or 3 lines per issue, but it gives me a general idea on, okay, in this issue I need this to happen, so then it can move to this story and then move to this story. And here we're going to wrap up some of it, but we're going to leave a little bit of it hanging so we can do another miniseries. So, it can be as short as just a few little notes. So, plotting is very important, and I think anybody who's going to hire you out there is going to want to know that you can do it. So you want to have some, ideas on that.
Right, and as far as dialogue goes, I've said before, just like writing, I've written plays I was in theater, so the spoken word, I'm sort of familiar with it, even though I am a quiet person, but I hear things. I can hear dialogue well, but to hear yourself say it out loud, sometimes because some things don't sound right if you say it out loud,
Right.
and maybe it may not sound true. Like with Maya, for Chris Noeth, it reads perfectly well. It's perfectly great English, but conversationally, it's not something you would say. More contractions, and we contract a lot in America. So
Yeah.
a lot of it was that, and flipping certain words. But that's another way to try things out, is to talk them out loud.
Right.
Listen to yourself on a tape recorder and see how it sounds. Imagine you are an editor listening to your own pitch.
Sounds good. And John is gone.
John is not gone. John is here. John is thinking, however, that we will have to save another type of writing that we're all familiar with for another podcast. I think it might be really good for us to talk about writing for websites and the magazine and other things of that nature, but that
Sure.
would definitely be its own show. So
Oh yeah.
I think we will need to leave that particular discussion and perhaps begin to close out.
One of us needs to make a note of that so we do come back to it. Because we talk about doing a lot of future podcasts. We don't. When we sit here to say, hey, what we're going to talk about, they don't always come up.
Yeah, I think the guy who records these things might want to write
He's
some
the
of that
guy
stuff
who
down.
does all the editing, too.
So he
Really?
hears it a lot.
Yeah, so he hears it more than
Yeah, a
us.
little too much. No, just joking. Um, yeah, I agree. That kind of writing and prose writing. I think there's a lot to be said about prose. I'm really interested in writing prose, especially on the two new properties, Race Danger and the one to be announced. So yeah, I think it would be cool to
Hmm.
talk more about that. Definitely. Um, yeah, I think we sort of tore up writing, didn't we? Hopefully,
We did it a little bit of service there.
hopefully we didn't scare anybody away. If it's what you want to do, please, please do it. There's ways to do it. Bill's out there looking at. Aren't you always out there willing to review portfolios and stuff for people, Bill?
Oh yeah. If it's a quick look, or if it's something that I can help you with, or you're having problems with something, you need a sounding board. That's what I'm there for. I mean, if it's going to be a longer thing, then yeah, it's like $10 for a longer thing. But yeah, I'm always willing to look at some. I just did that in the last couple of weeks for a couple of people. So it's like they're like, look at my portfolio or this piece here, and give me your thoughts, and I do. So that's no big deal. I mean, I sort of groove on that. So I am a resource. Use me.
Definitely. All right, John, you're talking about wrapping up. What has been
Yes,
gone?
indeed.
Even though it hasn't been that many days since we've last recorded, because we are recording this one a little bit early because I am leaving for New York, middle of the week.
Lucky boy, lucky boy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not looking forward to the drive up or the drive back, but interested in seeing the show. I've done New York shows, but it's been 15, 16 years ago. Interested in seeing how this show's set up, see how it's run. I know Reed runs a really nice convention. Just want to get my feet wet before I decide whether we set up there with Blue Line or if we set up as a studio or both next year. So I'm heading up there with friends, Chuck and Eric Adams and Bill Love, and we're going to check things out. So I guess what I was getting at is that it's only been a few days, but I know you've posted some stuff over on Comic Related. So what's going on over there?
Oh, indeed, the posting never stops. Well, the most recent thing is I'm always amused at the odd places that comic creators will turn up. And for yesterday, I found it's an old video from back in '98, I think, but Marvel inker and artist Scott Hanna
Hmm.
did the comic adaptation for Batman Forever, the truly horrifying sequel starring Val Kilmer and being the first to introduce Robin. Uh, he is on the Home Shopping Club.
What?
Home Shopping Club, yes, indeed. Hawking the comic and talking about comics.
Wow.
He is also sporting a serious mullet. And the two guys that are talking with him are that they are that kind of fake enthusiastic that you tend to get on those kind of things,
Hmm.
where they sound really enthusiastic, but you could tell they don't care less about comics. So um, I just thought that was rather interesting. So I put that up, and then I put up an old. It's actually in three parts, and then I put up an old documentary of his Spider-Man work, just in case people aren't familiar um, with Scott Hanna, who
Right.
actually does really good work.
Yeah.
So check that out. If nothing else, you'll get a little chuckle out of the just the oddness of him being on the Home Shopping Club. I mean, they seem to sell comics quite frequently on some of those shopping channels, but it's a little odd for an artist to actually pop up.
No,
Um,
QVC used to do a bunch, so you might look at those. Art. I remember seeing Art Nichols do one. So
that's it's. I just find it hilarious myself, and a little sad, but it's just an oddity, and I think that may be an ongoing thing. If I happen to find comics in weird places, that may be sort of an ongoing subgenre in the sketch blog. Sticking with Marvel. I found an interview with Adi Granov. Yeah, I can't seem to talk this evening. Who everyone should know as the artist on the Extremis arc of Iron Man and the artist behind all the uh, layouts for the Iron Man movies, with the second Iron Man movie just now coming out on DVD. So check that out. Then, actually, still sticking with Marvel, Rich Buckner, who is a very famous early Marvel artist, critiqued a young man's work at one of the comic conventions. And actually, at one point in this video, got out a piece of paper and started to not only draw what he was trying to tell the young man, but eventually to draw a Yellow Jacket himself. So check that out. It's only 4 minutes long, but there's a lot going on, and for some inexplicable reason, Stan Lee pops up at the end. But I think that just might have been a piece of film that got away from him. Then there, for Friday, this is an indie artist named James Riot, who does a webcomic called The Path. And he, at first I thought he was at an art store, but he actually appears to be at a comic store, teaching a class of young people on how to draw comics, more specifically on how to foreshorten. So that's another multi-layered thing. And then for that Thursday, I found, and I just love the name of this. It's this young creator named Teresa Pridemore, and she called this section of videos her Manifesto, which is short for her Mephisto Manifesto. She has a character named Mephisto. That is the character over her shoulder there in that large painting. And she discusses her process and, what all went into that. And I think that actually catches us up to where we were before.
Awesome. Bill, what's going on over at the forums and Comics Mentor?
Over at the forum, we still have the DVD sketch magazine DVD contest. Draw your favorite rock star in concert. You can go to the forum. Again, you can go to I think sketchmagazine.net, Comics Mentor for the link, and over on Comics Mentor in the last, I think I mentioned this earlier, I have an example of a script for Willow, which was one of the things I did for a contest. It's one of the characters from Sparta Bay, but I think I only ran maybe 2 or 3 pages back in the day, and this is maybe 4 or 5 pages. So you can see it, part of the, sort of the process that I've gone through on this, and actually, if you look under at the top, there's a sample plot button, and you can click on it, and there's another script that I've done, and you can see how I do things, or one of the ways that I do things. So that's been the implicit, of course, about the podcast and focusing your energies on things, and sort of bringing back that encouragement tangent that I sometimes go off on. So it's a party.
Yes,
it's a mentor party.
Cool. Let's see. I announced claysway.com is live. We're in our second week of posting, so please go check it out. It's claysway.com. See if I can write humor or not. Let me know. It has its own community. We got a podcast we're launching. It's like those podcasts are only like 8 minutes long because I'm by myself. So they're not long, but they'll get longer as I set up some interviews. I think you will see within the first 3 strips we posted that, as I always say here, we're learning along with you. On the 3rd strip, Bill remarked that the font really wasn't holding up, So I changed the font to a more traditional comic book type font. I like it much better myself. Um, John made a concept about one of the characters as prior to this podcast. And John, if you go and check it out, I just fixed what you commented about on
Sweet.
there. I went in and tweaked the art as we're all talking. So it's a work in progress. So check it out. It might not fit. It's a family and a kid and its imaginary panda bear. So if it's not your cup of tea, I totally understand. It's something personal with my family because of the references and the learning disability. So, but check it out, please. Sketchmagazine.net. That's what you guys hear about. We now have a Apple app, and I've got a link to it on sketchmagazine.net. It does cost $1.99 because the developers have to be paid for doing it, but we do make some money off of it, which we appreciate. It's up. It works. I've downloaded it. John, you downloaded it, correct?
Yep.
And
Yes, I did.
it's a great way to listen to these podcasts on the go. Also, we announced, and I don't have it linked yet, but I just noticed that it is available in the Blue Line store. The Sketch Magazine digital collection. It will include Sketch Magazines 1 through 10 digital. This is in formats of like CBZ, ZBRs, and PDFs. You get all three of those for each issue. You also get the best of sketch in digital format in all three of those. And we're going to include the first 10 episodes of this podcast on this. So it'll be all one DVD. So it's going to be available at the middle of this month, but Blue Line's already got it out for sale. I've got a little write-up on it on the site. I will go in later and make a link from it over to the Blue Line store. Or you can go to Blue Line store and search Sketch Digital. That's how I found it, and it's there. Podcast 11 went live this morning. Yes, this is Monday. So it's up. Please download and enjoy if you haven't already. And that's really all the updates I've got. Other than Sketch Magazine 40 is in bindery. It is printed. Hallelujah. I wasn't there, but I understand it is in bindery. So as soon as they can start stitching and trimming, they will be shoving them out the door. Believe me.
So as long as it doesn't blow up the bindery machine.
This issue has taken out many machines and many people, it seems like. So we'll see what happens. But they should start rolling out.
This is the cursed issue.
Yes. I can't wait to 41. Let's get this Alex Ross issue offered up. So.
And before we go, I've just thought of the line Clay should say at the end of the Clay's Way about recycling.
What?
I'm waiting for it to decompose.
Oh, I'm going to steal that one, John.
There you go. Perfect. And with that, it's time for us to bid you all good night and good creating.
Take care.
See ya.